President Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have just announced a golden dome for the United States. I think this is part of the golden age that Trump said that he promised when he came into office here for this second term. And now then here, they've mentioned it before, but today they made it official that there is going to be a golden dome, that it's going to be operational, fully operational about 3 years from now before he finishes his term of service. At least that's what's being said. We're gonna discuss a little bit about what's being claimed and then what might be real and what might be not. And we have Larry Johnson back with us today, former CIA analyst, and guys who've been tracking a lot of this stuff for a long time. Larry, first of all, just welcome back to the show as always.
Thanks, Dan.
We were talking real briefly before we came on the air. The minute that I mentioned something about a golden dome, your whole face kind of changed. You started laughing. Why is that?
Well, I'm old enough to remember Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defensive Initiative, the SDI. Boy, we're going to deploy that. And then we fell behind and then decided wisely to negotiate an agreement to prevent anti-ballistic missiles, a ballistic missile defense system. Because the fear was that if a country could develop an effective ballistic missile defense, then they would be tempted to use nuclear weapons because they could then fend off any retaliatory strike. So Reagan signed on to that. But then George W. Bush showed up and said, "Oh no, I got a great idea. Let's trash that. Well, we gotta build missile defense." And then he got lost in a war on terror, did nothing on missile defense. So Here we are now, where the Russians actually have a system that's called the S-550 that can take out satellites, can take out ballistic missiles, including hypersonic missiles, and the United States has nothing. So this is the race started like 2 hours ago. The Russians, Chinese are like 3 or 4 laps ahead, and we think we're going to catch up. It's not going to happen.
Well, probably because most of our viewers haven't seen this yet. Here's what the president said just minutes ago.
This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles, even if they are launched from other sides of the world and even if they are launched from space. And this is the one I was really looking forward to this day, because this is very important for the success and even survival of our country. It's a pretty evil world out there, so this is something that goes a long way toward the survival of this great country. And as I said, we'll be discussing Canada. They want to hook in and they want to see if they can be a part of it.
Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth put his 2 cents in.
It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. Mr. President, you said we're going to secure our southern border and get 100% operational control after the previous administration allowed an invasion of people into our country. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear.
Now, they claim there that it's not just intercepting missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic, advanced cruise missiles, drones from space or terrestrial launch, etc. And that Trump also in there claimed that it was the technology, unlike what happened with Reagan, who started this 40 years ago. Now he says the technology is 100% there and the tests have been 100% successful. What say you?
Balderdash. Golden Dome sounds to me a lot like golden toilet seat or golden wrench or golden hammer, glossing it up, making it shiny and making it extremely costly. It's just Trump's lying. I mean, he's marketing, he's selling, and he's overselling, but it's simply not true. The United States, our Patriot missiles have failed to intercept the Russian missiles, and they've been proven ineffective. That's the best we got. We got THAAD, the theater high altitude anti-air defense system. Again, that failed to take out a Houthi missile the other day. So the idea that I was listening to Trump. Oh, we're so far ahead. Nobody has anything like us. Excuse me. Just look at the technologies in China and Russia. It's been Russia that has been having to haul our sorry rear end to the space station for 20 plus years because we fell behind on the space side. And it's only thanks to Elon Musk that we're getting back into space, but nothing that the government did. So this is just nonsense.
So what about the Oreshnik missile, for example? I mean, Russia claims that that's indefeatable by any known technology right now. Is that true, or is that
yes?
Hyper?
I would say so. But judging from just the images we saw, it reacted unlike any other missile system we've ever seen. In terms of, it was almost like a bolt of plasma coming down on the Earth, and it's not nuclear. I suppose it could make it nuclear, but it's destructive enough as is without the nuclear component. So again, the Russians have three hypersonic missiles, and we're not talking about missiles that travel above the speed of, say Mach 6, but in addition to traveling above Mach 6, they are maneuverable. Because right now, if the only standard for a hypersonic missile is it goes above Mach 6, we got ballistic missiles that do that. But they're like it's like just a really fast cannonball, shoots in an arc and comes down, follows gravity. The ones the Russians have developed, they can pinpoint where they steer themselves. We don't have anything like that. And I personally know someone who's been involved with our program. And I've been listening to this good man for like 2 years, promising anytime now we're going to get like next week, and it never happens.
Yeah, and we're trying to get Professor Ted Postal back on, who's a really expert at these defense systems. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he said that at least as of today, even with whatever advances Russia and China have, that right now the existing fleets of ICBMs that all the various countries have are almost impervious, that even they couldn't with any certainty knock them down because they travel so fast. So it's hard for me to imagine how we're going to go from not being able to shoot down any of this stuff to suddenly being able to have 100% accuracy on even hypersonics. I'm unconvinced, I guess. And I say part of me would like it to be true, but I also recall during the Reagan time when the whole Star Wars thing was coming up and the Strategic Defense Initiative you mentioned, that got a lot of interest from the Soviet side, because they're saying basically that would change the nuclear balance of power. And now all of a sudden it's not mutually assured destruction, but it could put you in the driver's seat if it actually came to pass, because it would make you invulnerable while it would leave all of us very vulnerable. Do you see any issue from Russia on that this time?
Well, Russia's ahead. Like I said, Russia's ahead of the game. They have an air defense system that actually works and that is capable, that they believe, of defeating even some of the ballistic missiles. So, the reality for the United States is this: we're wanting to compete on a high-tech environment against the very best, if you will, scientists, engineers in the world. Yet the United States, in terms of its education level, our literacy rate has fallen from 97% to 74%. Over 50% of adults read at the 6th grade level or lower. So at the very time that we're talking about, well, we're going to go out and do all this magical, futuristic, high-tech space stuff, our populations become stupider, more ignorant, incapable of doing such things. Whereas in contrast, the Chinese and Russians, they're clicking along at 97, 98% literacy. In fact, in China, in that age group between 16 and 30, 100%. And they're taking math, they're taking physics, they're taking chemistry. And here in the United States, we're trying to figure out what gender I are.
Yeah, and I've seen lots of images of late about the robotic technological advancement that the Chinese side specifically is making. A lot of this stuff is just kind of off the charts in computing and other kind of areas. So we need to be a little bit careful about being so braggadocious that we don't pay attention that we may be falling way behind. And as you point out, systematically, we've got some real headwinds that we're creating on our own end to even try to catch up. That's what we should be paying attention to.
Look, if you can't walk down into a New York subway without feeling like you're walking into an underground toilet, without having to worry about getting attacked by rats, and then you think that your society is something special, go into a Moscow subway station. There you think you've walked into the Louvre, into the Hermitage, into an art gallery of extraordinary quality. And that tells you the difference right there. If you care enough to even clean up your subway so they don't smell like open sewers, then you can actually do some other great stuff. We can't even do the basic stuff in the United States. We need to stop kidding ourselves. We're the ugly old hag looking in the mirror saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror lies to us. Oh, yeah, you look really good, baby.
Well, that's quite an imagery there for you. Yeah. That's less than ideal. I want to move on to some other things that Trump has said here recently that's in some of the wheelhouse that we've been talking about a lot. I had Colonel McGregor on earlier today. We talked about some of the things that Trump has said after the phone call with Putin, some of the things that Putin had said on the other side of that. Since that show, we've come across some additional information, which you said you also had seen already, but I want to share it with our viewers because it is very, very telling about what may be coming next and what Putin actually meant when he was the things that he said to Trump and in public after that. And just kind of as a quick recap, Trump came out and he was very excited about the conversation. He called Zelensky, he called the European leaders, and he said he was very optimistic about what happened. According to Axios this morning, the European leaders were not so excited and they didn't understand why Trump was, because it kind of sounded like Putin came out saying the same thing after the meeting that he had said before the meeting, and that nothing had changed and that their conditions were still the same. So which was, yes, the word ceasefire was used, and yes, the word end of war negotiations was used, but there is this little thing of a memorandum they're putting together, which, by the way, has to accommodate what Russia wants, and as long as they can get the other side to agree to it, everything will be fine. But the other side is not okay with that. So here's the bigger problem, and this is what Medvedev had in a very large meeting today of Russian legal experts in Moscow, I believe it was.
It's St. Petersburg.
It was St. Petersburg?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It was
in fact, Alexander Makuros is there right now.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's attending it, so he probably heard the speech.
I see. Well, we'll be certainly looking forward to having him on. He's going to be on here shortly, maybe even later this week if we can arrange it. But there was actually a lot of things that he said in that. We could spend a whole show on that, but I'm going to look at two things in particular, because the first one is he said something that I believe you and I have talked about before, that this opportunity for a negotiated settlement might be the last one they get.
As for the current Ukraine, we all know that we are not happy with the current political regime in Ukraine. But nonetheless, this is the last chance to Ukraine to preserve, once the military actions are over, to preserve some kind of statehood or some kind of international recognition as a subject of international law and its right for future development.
And if anybody has any idea, any confusion about what he means by that, he spelled it out shortly thereafter.
И такие переговоры могут позволить обрести мир. Но нужно помнить, что для киевского режима есть и другой путь, о котором тоже неоднократно говорилось. Это путь безоговорочной капитуляции. Такая формула мира в международном праве тоже существует. Если сказать прямо, многим в нашей стране она нравится куда больше.
So, yeah, many in our country want, they don't want a negotiated settlement that's agreed to, the so-called June 14 conditions from last summer. they want a complete subjugation of Ukraine. What do you say to that? Is that just hyperbole? Is that just wishful thinking?
No, no. The Russians mean what they say. Even, the June 14 presentation by Putin to the foreign ministry a year ago, made it very clear that, before there can be any actual negotiations about a ceasefire, about a peace, 5 basic things need to happen. One of the critical ones is that Ukrainian troops are pulled out of all of these 4 oblasts. Now, in the West, we say, oh, that's not going to happen. They don't get to control that. We don't have a say in it. We think we do. That's Russia's position. They're not backing off of that. Not 1 inch. Those provinces, oblasts, are now part of Russia per the referendum. And whether we call it a sham or not doesn't make a bit of difference. The other thing is NATO's going to have to back the hell away and stop. I don't know if you've watched this week, the tensions in the Baltic Sea are really heating up. And you had the Estonia the other day attempt to seize a Russian ship that was in international waters. The Russians activated an Su-35 that deliberately flew through Estonian airspace, turned off the transponders, and was basically giving them the middle finger as they flew over. And then they went out after a Polish aircraft and the Estonian ships, and all the European poodles ran away. Well, then yesterday, an Estonian ship was in Russian territorial waters. Russians seized it. They said, okay, you're going to sail into our waters, we're going to take you. So the Russians have reached, I think, their breaking point. They would like to have good relations with the United States, if possible, but not at the expense of becoming a victim of abuse again. They're out of that toxic relationship. It's going to be on an even-handed basis. And, frankly, it doesn't even matter what Trump thinks, because our Congress, now with 80 members signing on to the bone-crushing sanctions that Lindsey Graham wants, so that's going to pass the Senate. The House is going to pass it. We're going to be then in this warlike stance towards Russia, and Russia is going to tell us to go pound sand. And we think we could do something about it. We couldn't stop the damn Houthis, for God's sake. When are we going to wake up and come to grips with reality?
Yeah, and on that same topic, Gary, do we still have that full screen we had from earlier today where Lavrov was talking about taking care of the religious people? Yeah, this is almost as important, I think, as what Dmitry Medvedev said today, because Lavrov said Russia will not leave the Orthodox people of Ukraine in trouble and will ensure that their legitimate rights are respected and canonical orthodoxy remains in its place in spiritual life of the people in Ukrainian lands. The guarantee that these goals will be achieved is the position of the Russian Federation. Now, I think you and I have talked about a number of times, and you brought it up before, but what the Russians consider NovoRussia includes considerable territory on the other side of the current line of contact, not just the administrative borders of the 4 areas. Do
Right.
you read into this that Russia is getting more and more bold of saying, we're not going to just be satisfied with where we're at. We're going to go all the way to the Dnipro River.
Yeah, no, they're going. They hope that they could achieve this through a peaceful negotiation. But, I think they've come to realize there's no chance of that. The West, Trump and his team don't get it. They keep indulging in these fantasies that, we got a 22-point plan, and all Russia has to do is stop where they are and let us put some NATO troops in between them. NATO is the problem. It has been NATO expanse to the east that has created this. I went back and looked at the military exercises by president. Under Bill Clinton, we're doing an average 2 to 3 exercises per year. By the time we get to Donald Trump, they're doing 5 military exercises every single year. We are escalating all throughout that time. Trump was part of that escalation. The Russians know this.
Yeah, see, we
Trump-
don't. We don't pay
Trump
any attention
doesn't.
to
Trump
that,
doesn't.
but the Russians do.
Yeah. So, they actually, it's sort of, I think they're somewhat amused in dealing with Trump, because Trump genuinely believes that he had nothing to do with escalating this crisis. And I talked to Doug McGregor about that last week, and the interview we just posted today at Countercurrents. But in Doug's position was, Trump, they kept Trump in the dark with a lot of, the military, the Pentagon, and the CIA kept Trump in the dark, and he didn't even know what questions to ask. And a lot of the staff around him that should have been looking out for him weren't. So even Kash Patel, when he was over at DOD, was thwarting Donald Trump's order to start drawing down troops out of Afghanistan.
Oh, fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that I don't know if you call it delusion or just lack of ability to see things as they are. I guess maybe those are not necessarily separate issues. But I want to show you something here. Ordinarily, when we show Jack Keane, it's because he's just dead wrong on something, or he's trying to go down a bad path, etc. But in this one, at least for the most part here, you're going to find out that what he's kind of complaining about is pretty close to accurate, with a little bit of an oddity at the way he ends it.
He also knows the president is impatient, so he drags out these negotiations and makes no concessions at any of these negotiations that have taken place, and I don't expect any of it going forward. And then he obviously talking to the president because he wants to avoid sanctions, and his attempt is to convince the president that he's interested in peace as much as the president is. Of course, his actions don't speak to that. And he's also trying to convince the president that what he wants is normalized relations with Russia, which would have significant economic benefit to both countries. That is a true statement. But it's pretty hard to have normalized relations with a criminal who's conducting genocide on a regular basis.
We'll talk about the end of that there in just a second, but I think that he's where he's right about that Putin's not willing to have a negotiated settlement that's not in his favor. I don't think it's accurate. You tell me what you think, that Putin doesn't want peace. I think he does want peace, but on his terms only, because he has the ability to do it. It's not like that, no, I just want to fight. I think that he wants to accomplish it, and he'll get it one way or the other. How do you see it?
Yeah, it's the same way as Lincoln during the Civil War. He wasn't going to accept a country that was divided in half. This country was going to be unified, and he was going to fight to make it happen. That's how that ended. With respect to Putin, this is not, people like Keane somehow conceptualize this as the territorial ambitions of an imperial Russia under Putin's leadership wanting to conquer territory in Ukraine. Doesn't have a damn thing to do with it. It has the fact to do that the expansion of NATO, the training and expansion of the Ukrainian army for the express purpose of being in a position to attack and destroy Russia, that's what Putin's reacting to. And the ones who have been repeatedly aggressive over the years has been the West, the United States. Now, I'm glad to hear that Jack Keane, in talking about this genocidal monster, at least is accurately describing Benjamin Netanyahu. And so I appreciate. He wasn't talking about.
That's exactly where I was going to go with that, because he was ironically trying to apply that to Putin, and it's like, wow, the actual definition, like the legal definition, applies to rather a different leader than the one he had in mind here. And in fact, I want to, in the amount of time we have left here, I want to pivot over to that topic about the Middle East, because while most people have still been talking about today about what happened with the Putin-Trump conversation, what all that's going to mean, what the Europeans have been saying, and Zelensky and all these other folks, kind of under the radar, there was another hearing today in the U.S. Senate where Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was talking about the Trump's positions on Gaza. And the questions that are going to be laid out here, I'm going to show you a couple of scenes from that hearing today by Senator Merkley, the first one's going to be a little bit long, but I did it intentionally, and I actually cut it shorter than what it was. But it is very, very important about what he lays out to the senator, and then what Rubio's comment is that, and where the Trump administration is going. Watch this first one.
I very much supported Israel going after Hamas following October 7th, but we are now well over a year and a half into this, and there's a new phase of events, which I'll try to summarize. 6 months ago, Finance Minister Smotrich said Israel should thin the population through voluntary migration. He also used the term encouraged migration. These terms are considered a euphemism for forced displacement. And the strategies of forced migration are food denial, the demolition of homes so that there's no place to return to, and driving people from one area in the Gaza Strip south to the southern side. Then there is a new plan called Operation Gideon's Chariot, mass call-up of troops in Israel. And Netanyahu said a few days ago, he said, we're going to take over all the areas of the Gaza Strip. By the way, on that forced displacement or the demolition of homes, I want to put up a chart to accentuate the point. This is satellite images done by the New York Times that show before the war, the detailed homes, mass damage before the ceasefire, and then since the ceasefire, absolutely the entire neighborhood turned to rubble. There's just basically nothing left that is habitable. So Olcha said 2,000 children, acute malnutrition. That's a nice way of saying we're starving. In March, there were 36 children admitted for acute malnutrition. The denial of food the blockade began March 2nd, so the numbers are undoubtedly up much higher in April and now into May. Does the U.S. consider this an acceptable strategy of encouraging migration?
Well, I would say that we were pleased and to see that aid is starting to flow in again. I understand your point that it's not in sufficient amounts, but we were pleased to see that decision was made. I understand another 100 trucks are behind that and maybe more in the next few days. I'll also tell you that I met in Rome 3 days ago with the World Food Program to walk through some of the ideas and plans they had for distribution on the ground. And ultimately, the answer here is for this to end, hopefully with the elimination of Hamas, because the people of Gaza deserve a more prosperous, peaceful future, which they'll never have as long as Hamas exists.
How can someone look at all that stuff that's happened and say they are pleased with it because 5 trucks came in when, according to all the experts that I've been able to sign, they need about 500 trucks per day for the minimum nutritional values to survive and just to exist. And then it's been blocked off since March the 7th. It's only now a handful of trucks have gone in. And I just cannot understand how it's American policy and that you're defending it as being fine as long as some food trucks get in.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do anything to disrupt Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. And by that, we are complicit. We are accomplices to murder. And, it's a stain that our country will never, I think, ever erase from its garments. The fact of the matter is, the United States has a very consistent pattern in warfare, unfortunately. That's quite different from that of the Soviets and the Russians. When the Soviets were fighting, they went out of their way to not inflict civilian casualties. And I don't want to hear people say, oh, but Stalin murdered all, just stop with that. Let's focus on the war. And what we've seen with Russia and the Donbass, the same thing. The vast majority of the casualties are military, not civilian. Whereas the United States consistently, whether we're talking World War II in Europe or Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan.
Korean War, add that to the list.
Yeah. The Korean, we kill more civilians than we do military. In Germany, we killed 259,000 plus German soldiers in combat, and an estimated 600 to 900,000 civilians were killed in our bombing raids. So we don't have a good track record when it comes to preserving civilian life. And candidly, we don't even look upon the Palestinians as human beings, the reality in terms of our actions. So it's shameful. But, this isn't just Trump and Rubio. This is Biden and Blinken. This has been, one president after another, Obama and his crew. The Palestinians have never been accorded the respect as being human beings worthy of being treated as equals.
The discussion continued on, and Senator Merkley wanted to press Rubio on, do you agree with this policy?
The systematic destruction of remaining homes as a way to make it impossible for people to stay in Gaza. Does the U.S. discourage that? Is it discouraging the Netanyahu government from continuing that strategy?
Well, we don't view that that's their strategy. We understand that they are targeting elements of Hamas, is what they have claimed and said to us and to the world, that they believe that they need to root out the remaining elements of Hamas, who, by the way, have been an impediment to multiple ceasefires that I know have been negotiated and even agreed upon by Hamas external and then vetoed by Hamas internal.
So, no, that's not what Israel's doing, because they said it wasn't. So what your eyes see, what those graphic images right behind him show unequivocally, Rubio just says, yeah, no, that's not happening. So, of course, we're not going to dispute something that doesn't happen. In fact, it's Hamas. Hamas has been the ones. They have been the reason why the people. I mean, that is so far detached from reality. It's like, how can you even have a conversation, Larry, when you have this kind of comment at the very top?
Yeah, well, the lies, the dishonesty, and disingenuousness. Look, Hamas, when it came into existence, the Israeli intelligence service immediately saw it as a device to be used to prevent a two-state solution. And how were they going to prevent it? They provided funding to keep Hamas alive, that helped Hamas operate, in order so that they could oppose the Palestinian Liberation Authority. Yasser Arafat and his crowd. So that's why, Rubio gets said, oh, yeah, Hamas always is opposed to the peace process. They were doing so really at the behest and funding of the Zionists, of the Israelis. So Israel has always made sure that they could sabotage any genuine effort towards peace. And now what they've created, though, is a movement among the Palestinian people where they've lost family members and loved ones of all ages, and they're going to fight. They'll fight to the death. What do they have to lose? They fight and die, or they do nothing and die. They're going to fight and die. And in the process, they're going to take a lot of Israelis with them, and maybe even wind up destroying Israel as a viable country, because right now Israel is becoming increasingly isolated. And we just had China make, if you will, a veiled threat that calling on Israel to stop this or else. And I don't know what the or else is.
Gary, can you reload that one soundbite we used, I think, earlier today of the guy from the Knesset making the comments? You know the one I'm talking about?
Just the one talking about killing babies?
He's gonna load that up here in a second, because I want to run a show, because we're not talking about mischaracterizing people. We're not saying that, okay, well, you, Davis, you're trying to say that Netanyahu's intentionally turning to rubble this stuff, but you heard Rubio there said, no, they're just going after Hamas. Hamas is cowardly hiding, in every single house, so that it all has to be rubbled, etc. But that really the Israelis, they're looking for a way out of this. They're looking for a way to end this and to have a just peace, etc. As it turns out, Gary, just give me a thumbs up when he's here from the mouth. And by the way, let me set this up a little bit. This is a former member of the Knesset who on the 23rd of October, 2023, so about 2 weeks after the terrorist strike that started this big explosion that led to the incursion in here, said that he believed what Israel should do is turn the Gaza Strip into Dresden, and they should firebomb it to completely and totally destroy it. You saw those images behind Senator Merkley. That's exactly what happened. Here's what he said on Israeli television today.
כל ילד, כל תינוק בעזה הוא אויב. האויב הוא לא חמאס, והוא גם לא הזרוע הצבאית של החמאס, כמו שהפצ"רית שלנו מספרת לנו שאסור לנו לפגוע בחמאסניק, אלא אם כן הוא חלק מהזרוע הצבאית. כל ילד בעזה הוא האויב. אנחנו צריכים לכבוש את עזה וליישבה, ושלא יישאר שם ילד עזתי אחד. אין ניצחון אחר.
So I didn't know that Adolf Hitler spoke Hebrew. Okay, I mean, what's coming out of his mouth is the same garbage that came out of the mouths of SS troops who were stuffing Jews, children, into ovens, into gas chambers. Now this man has joined with them. You know, it's like, for people like that, I never again want to hear any big crocodile tears about the Holocaust. They've completely discredited themselves.
And by the way, we had was it Katie
Helper.
Katie Helper on the show and a week or so ago, and she pointed out that there are Holocaust survivors themselves that are outraged by this stuff. And you know, I myself have been to Auschwitz. I've been to Dachau 3 times. I've been, you know, I've studied this stuff intensely, and I'm horrified by all the things that happened in the past, equally to what I'm horrified now. And I have always been angered when I've seen so many of the current Israeli government hide behind the Star of David and to justify the slaughter of people the same degree that they were done here. Now it's a different scale, but that doesn't matter because there hasn't been, so far anyway, 6 million Palestinians who have been murdered. Maybe the number is only 100,000. Like that makes any difference. The population is smaller, but the level of barbarity and the turning of them into somebody that's not. And again, this is a guy who's been well known to say this stuff, and he's still put on Israeli television. And I checked this morning, and at least I couldn't find anything where he was censored by the government or anybody saying anything against it. Ergo, there's a lot of people who agree with this, and I think that it's abominable, and the U.S. should completely detach itself from this. If they wanted to conduct that stuff, I don't think they should, but they damn sure shouldn't do it with our facilitation.
Yeah, well, in fact, a couple of prominent Israelis have spoken up and spoken against this, and they've been labeled as anti-Semites. Here you got, you know, you're Jewish and you're Israeli, but you're still an anti-Semite because you dare to criticize this monstrous policy and this evil. And, you know, frankly, that former member of the Knesset, and he was actually in a leadership position, he professes that this is what his God tells him to do. Then his God is a demon. His God is nothing holy, it's unholy.
Well, I can assure you, it's not the actual God of the Jews. I've studied that. That's a perversion of what it is, and it's a using of the name of God to commit barbarity that is not condoned.
There was another Jew that walked around that area that said something about those that harm children. It's better to have a millstone tied around their neck and tossed into the sea.
I remember that comment by Jesus. Yeah. Yes, indeed. We've also had Omar Bartov, a former IDF soldier, come on and say that he's just beside himself with, I don't remember if his grief is the term he used, but he just cannot believe that someone, a Jew who has studied Holocaust studies and teaches it at Brown University, has to watch this stuff happen with his own people now doing the very thing that he has been condemning others for doing around the world. But again, that is a born and bred Jew, someone who is from Israel proper. And they're saying this. So it's not just people from the outside. There are some, unfortunately, their numbers are too small, and there are too many that agree with this stuff. And I just think, Larry, this is going to have a really bad ending for Israel. I think you just said it a second ago, but I think that they are laying a foundation to harm themselves in ways that are going to be far worse than anything that existed prior to October 7th.
Yeah, unrecoverable. And yet, you know, you have many people who are Jewish that, whether it's Max, Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, is it?
Yeah.
And
add
then
Bernie Sanders to that list.
And Jeff Sachs and Katie Halper, as you pointed out. So a number who's speaking out. So, but this particular Zionist crowd, they're possessed of a madness, and there's no humanity in it. That's what's so sad.
Yeah, it's terrifying to see the virility and the anger coming out of his mouth when he's talking about slaughtering children.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not even pretending that, well, that's collateral damage. We're really going after he didn't even pretend that. Just expressly pounded his fist on the. I just had to watch it 2 or 3 times to see, did I really see that? I had to go back and make sure it wasn't a fake video, because there are people who are anti-Semitic, and I'm opposed to that, just categorically against. And I wanted to make sure that somebody wasn't trying to do something, but no, turns out that the guy was totally valid. It's
yeah, it was shocking.
But be that as it may, listen, we really appreciate it. I know you got to run. You got some other requirements to take care of. So appreciate you coming on today and talk about all of these issues today. We covered quite a bit of things on our show, and really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me and let me vent. Appreciate it.
Always appreciate it. Thank you very much. And appreciate you guys too, especially staying with you so late on a Tuesday afternoon. We appreciate it. But we give you the breaking news when it happens. Be sure and join us. If you haven't done that already, become a member. It helps us continue to expand what we do here at Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Some things cost a little bit of funds. And if you're helping us out doing that, we really appreciate it. And likewise, also, we're on a podcast now, and anywhere that you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Just type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive and you'll find us there waiting for you. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.